One of the biggest problems that a music producer has is when they get to a certain point of their quality, they kind of reach this barrier point and you get confused as to how to get any better. You're not too sure if there's any ways, and so you start reaching out to external factors such as maybe feedback sessions, maybe you're going to a mentor or two and trying to get some more detailed analysis on what your underlying problems are that you seem to just keep encountering. But a lot of the feedback that you might get are just more creative things. And so you kind of just keep going through this vicious cycle of making tracks, trying to get feedback, and not really improving on the quality and quantity side. Now in this video, I'm going to go over how I analyze all of my students in industry sets production from a quality and quantity standpoint. So figuring out exactly what's slowing somebody down on a systematic process through figuring out what their bottlenecks are and building it out to a point where they're absolutely confident and with conviction that their music is at a higher tier standard. Now, there's a few things to take into consideration when we're trying to analyze what's actually holding us back in terms of our productivity and our production as a whole. The first thing is, if you are producing music at a higher standard, then you have to recognize that the only way that you actually get better at music production is through training your ears to notice things that you didn't notice before. And so if you're at a more earlier standpoint in your production career and you're just starting out, maybe your ears aren't going to be trained to what they need to be to actually move forward. And the only way you're actually going to be able to do that is through repetition, through trial and error. And of course, feedback definitely helps that because it opens up your ears to things that you didn't even know were there before. However, if you are at a higher standard with your production quality, then it's going to take a little bit further analysis to figure out what's actually holding you back. Now, my biggest focus when I work with somebody at industry set is by analyzing what their bottlenecks are. And how I do that is by doing a high volume of isolation work. Now, this might be getting somebody to do a high volume of, let's say, maybe build-ups or drops or breakdowns, whatever it might be. So isolating parts of somebody's production. Because if we're isolating parts of the production, then we're not putting all our energy and bandwidth into trying to make an overall track. Because oftentimes when you're trying to make an overall track, you'll try to, spread yourself out in all the areas that you're good and bad in, but you're not really completely aware of what's actually hindering your progress because you have a very limited amount of time before your brain finds it too difficult to keep working on the track. And that's when you get bored of a track and you go, hey, I'm going to go work on something new now. So in order for us to actually make the most out of getting better at production, we have to fine tune all these smaller areas. So just isolating all the bits and pieces that make something together. So if you're analyzing your breakdowns or isolating your build-ups, whatever it might be, by doing these things separately, you're able to start seeing reoccurring problems in those areas. Because oftentimes when you're writing a whole track, you'll overlook a lot of things because you only have so much bandwidth and energy and time to work on that track before your brain goes, oh, this is too difficult, let's make the next track. Because it's way easier to get that dopamine fixation, right, when you start in the track. So again, speed is going to be really necessary, whatever we're going to be doing in production for those factors. And if you haven't checked out the previous video I've posted on this channel about how dopamine really impacts the way we produce music, then I highly recommend you check that out. So then this point makes more sense. With the whole isolation part of production, so like I was saying before, if you're able to do that at a high volume, you will start seeing recurring problems in your production. So if you're doing, a bunch of build-ups over and over again of, let's say, recreating somebody else's build-up, you can then start to see the comparison between the reference track of just isolating that part of production and yours and seeing the recurring problems, because you can start seeing how close you got it to that reference track, but just isolating the build-up. So you had more bandwidth and energy and time to make those build-ups the best they can possibly be, right? And by doing so, we're gonna actually see what's actually holding you back, like truly is, because you had all this time and energy to just focus on that isolation part rather than trying to write a whole track. Because if you tried to write a whole track within a week, it's very likely that, depending on what your production level is at, that it might not be as good as, let's say, if we were only doing a build-up or multiple build-ups, because we had more energy to spread ourselves out on those things, right? As opposed to doing a whole track, which requires a lot more effort. Now, maybe you're somebody that already really has a high quality and quantity and you're able to, bust out tracks really fast. But there's always going to be some kind of part of your production that's going to be hindering your progress. And that's why you're watching this video. Now, maybe it's your sound design, maybe it's your mixing and mastering, whatever it might be. Everybody has bottlenecks within their production and it's in an endless loop of learning So we can always be getting better. And the hard part is really just identifying what that thing is. And so following this process that I'm explaining in terms of isolating parts of your production and doing a high volume of that to actually start seeing recurring problems that are hidden within your actual production process, that's how you're going to level up faster. The first thing is really identifying the problem, and just following the process I just mentioned is going to be the best way of doing that. Now, the second thing here is going to be start building systems around that. So once you've identified what your problem is, let's say it's a lack of low mids, and you keep doing that in all the, little isolation things that you're doing. So maybe all the drops you've done are lacking mid bass, or maybe that they're lacking sub, or maybe that it's a high-end thing where maybe at like 5K kilohertz or 8K kilohertz, there's going to be a bunch of like high resonance in all your drops or something like that. So if you start to notice these things reoccurring, then okay, that's a bottleneck. What can we do to really eliminate that problem? What kind of system can we put in place so then that doesn't keep happening? Because identifying the problem is one thing, but actually taking action on it is going to be a whole nother thing. So then we can actually stop it from happening over and over again. And when I say create a system, I mean go through, let's say, your template, your starting point, figure out, okay, if I'm continuously lacking saturation in this area, maybe I should always automatically have a saturator on this particular channel strip. Or maybe it's on your groups are lacking the right kind of gain staging. Maybe you can set up some kind of automation there, or maybe have, soft clippers across a lot of your channels and groups so that you have more control of your gain staging. Because these systems are really important, so then not only you save more time, but the more time you save in working on that particular song, the more efficiency and hard work and quality is going to come into the tracks, because you'll have more bandwidth to try new techniques. You have more time to work on the track before you get bored of it. And that means that the track is just going to be better in general, because you've had more energy bandwidth to not worry about tedious things and not have all these bottlenecks slow you down. Now, once you've figured out what your systems are, it's going to be a lot easier for you to start to optimize your workflow. And optimizing your workflow can come in a lot of different ways. So maybe you're tidying up your template, maybe you're optimizing the sample selection that you have, eliminating a lot of the samples that you don't ever touch or need. For example, it's something that I recommend everybody. If you've got a bunch of sample packs that you've never even opened, and they're in the same pack that you always gravitate towards, but you never even use half of them, then it's a good idea to just remove those completely. Put them somewhere else in your computer if you're a sample hoarder. If not, just delete them all. Delete all the ones that you've never used. You only need like 10 of your favorite types of samples for each type of sample. So maybe 10 kick drums, maybe 10 snares, 10 hi-hats, etc. So you don't need to have a huge variety of all sorts of different samples. And by limiting the amount of choice, that means you're going to be quicker at deciding on what you're going to use for each session. I hope this has been useful to you guys. Optimizing your workflow and figuring out what your systems are so then you can eliminate all your bottlenecks is going to be one of the most effective methods of leveling up your production. Now, if you're a music producer that has been struggling in all these areas and you're looking to optimize your production as a whole, then you can click a link in our bio in our description below, and from there you can book in a discovery session with myself, one of the student advisors, and we can really help you out with this whole production process in terms of figuring out what your bottlenecks are with you. That being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.